all that we're actually asking and expecting Wilson to do is the design and whatever else?
When they do it's a good question, Larry. This is the same exact format we use on culverts and roads. Do a complete estimate, do the complete permit, and in the estimate, how much will it cost to manage the project? So give me a comprehensive estimate to do the entire project, plus the cost of the contractor to do the work. And then I go forward. Otherwise, we'd be saying, okay, here's an estimate, but then do another estimate for me for construction management too. Mm-hmm. Construction, the design, the permit, the cost to do the job. That's what they give us, one-stop shopping estimate.
So I guess just to clarify, we're expecting that their management of this future project is already estimated to a certain degree, and it's included within the 30.
No, within the 30, they'll tell us how much the entire project will cost, including construction management.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right.
Okay.
And that the 30 has enough funds. It does go a step further, that the 30 has enough funds to perform the construction management.
So there is sort of a swag estimate of how much that'll be.
That is correct. We did that. It's very common with us. And if it has to change on the construction request, then we'll request extra money in the construction project.
Sarah?
My first question is, why are we not just moving forward with the design since we already have the $55,000 approved that included design and construction?
No, it was just approved for construction. We're going to stop and not go straight into construction. We're going to stop and say, we're going to do design only right now. And the original estimate did not say we'll come back to the board for an additional amount of money because the construction fund was inadequate. It said construction for $55,400. So let's just be much more realistic and honest about it. Let's go get a design and an estimate so we know what we're getting into.
Question, did we learn enough from the retaining wall and the admin to understand what we need to do on this wall?
Yes, we did. We learned a tremendous amount. And good news on this one is we're not within a perimeter of a creek. That required extra permits for the scope of easily $25,000.
Questions?
I was just going to reach a similar point that basically we have learned enough to know that this could go way above the 50 some odd that we thought it would cost. So let's back down and start over again with,
Be much more cautious and pragmatic.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Call a question.
With no objection? All those in favor? And the vote is unanimous. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Financial statements?
Please, Madam Account Manager.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. So we have our balance sheet on page 20, and I would like it noted that the building completion deposit fund is understated by approximately $20,000, and that's because, as noted in a prior board meeting, we're in the process of moving those funds from our local banking partner, the WECU, to our main banking partner, the Mutual of Omaha, and that account just took a little bit of time to get set up, and so that will be reflected in December's financial statements.
Did you say 20,000?
Oh, I did.
I thought it was a little different.
200,000. Thank you.
Add a zero. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And so that's the first and second line on the balance sheet there under the unaudited November 30th column. We'll also be getting the balance of our SURF loan here in December, and so the liability will increase to the just under the $1.625 million that the board has previously approved. You'll see on page 21 that we have our financial statements, both operating and capital, for the year so far, and so far we are doing better than budget in our operating. And our capital reserves have brought in $501,000, and that's mainly because we have 97.4% collections. So our collections are doing great. I think that our capital reserve fund schedule on page 22 is really telling. For the SURF column, it shows that we'll have about $363,000 at the end of the year of net usable cash for SURF. If you recall, earlier in the year, we weren't sure how much it was going to cost to be able to develop Area Z. Neither were we sure if those additional funds would come from our own capital reserves or from an additional loan. And the board decided late in the year to have that come from an additional loan. And so a lot of our projects for SURF were not approved for the year that were in the budget. And so that's part of the reason we have so much in operations, repairs, and maintenance costs this year, is that those assets were not replaced. The equipment, the vehicles that were already scheduled on our 2018 SURF budget. So those funds will just roll over into next year, and we'll be able to reprioritize those assets to replace next year. Our roads fund, we've spent most of our roads money this year, and we're moving some of our design on the culvert work into 2019. Our capital reserve holding fund, which is the 1/4% transfer fee that we get on new home sales, is at $307,000. We've had almost 340 transactions this year, so home sales. That doesn't mean new home owners, but it means home sales. The board density reduction fund has approximately $82,000 in the mailbox fund from the old special assessments, almost $3,000. And then we have our operations reserve, so emergency ops and UDR.
Jennifer, can I ask a question really quick before we move away from this page?
Sure.
Under the SURF column, we have the anticipated loan SURF funding as an increase to our total available. Do we have that full amount? I don't see that full amount expensed here as a negative, so is this showing $500,000 income that we don't show the expenses for, basically? Am I reading that correctly?
So the additional SURF funding is up to $1.6 million. So they're going to give us all of those funds, but the project has a large amount of contingency in it, and so we may not spend all of that contingency on the project. So I don't know that we're going to spend all of that contingency, and it will be purchased back into the project at the end. The schedule for our assets on the SURF projects is on page 26.
So I guess my concern is if we were to spend all of that, if we end up, something goes way over, or we end up spending every penny of that contingency, we would really be negative in SURF?
I'll go ahead and look further into that and get back to you. Thank you. So on page 23, we have our current month, and if you'll note, in golf for revenue, we're $16,000 better than budget. We had two winter events, was it not? Two very successful winter series events for golf.
I'll point out they sold out and had to turn people away.
So we are in golf, as Mitch mentioned earlier, not through November, but through the current date, as of last week, at $792,000 in golf, which is better than we've ever been in golf, that I have records of. I think it could have been something prior to that, but. And then on page 25, we have our lot count, so where we're at with all of our lots. The auditors were really curious to learn, why do you only have 3,147 billable lots and 4,641 actual lots? How does that work? Where did the dues go? So that's a discussion about density reduction and covenants to bind, and so that's something that's new for them, unique, I guess, to Sudden Valley is more appropriate. So, are there any other questions on the financial statements?
Okay, hearing no questions. Move on to committee reports and voting is necessary. First item on here is the volunteer committee documents. This year, if you look at the first one on page 29, this is something that I will be contacting each one of the committee chairs to fill out with the kind of the rules on how to run the meetings, et cetera, and what you are going to agree to. Most of them are straightforward. Some of them do have a question, a yes/no answer that we have to give. On the next page, on page 31, each chair will have one of these pages. And we are going to ask that you have each one of your members sign off that they have received a copy of the harassment policy, the no authority to sign contracts letter, and the code of conduct. Those 3 documents are found on pages 33 to 42, and we will have staff provide the number of copies necessary for each member of your committee. Questions on this? We have reviewed all these in the past, and these are what the board has agreed to. Okay. If there are no questions on that, then moving forward to the committees and their reports, the Architectural Committee has posted minutes. Yes, Larry.
Question
Yes.
on that. Should that be a policy? Should that be, pardon me, should that be a policy? Should the board vote on this, or is this just a recommendation?
No, we've already discussed all of these.
Well, we have discussed them, but this is
Yeah,
the final
no,
version.
My recollection is whether we made some changes to all of these documents.
That's correct. We did make some
And
changes. I don't
and
recall.
I thought we voted on them. Did we not vote on them?
I don't
I thought we
recall
did.
voting on those changes. But perhaps we did. I don't recall.
We marked them up and voted on them as a whole. to
As a whole.
accept As,
Okay.
as
All right, thank you.
being given to the committees.
Okay, thank you. Did not recall.
But this does constitute the I guess, the clean copy,
Yes.
which we didn't have before.
Yeah. That's, Sarah?
Sorry, I have just a comment on the one on page 41. I remember we talked about this, and I thought we added something, but maybe not, maybe it makes sense to other people. So when I'm reading through this policy, that volunteers and that no volunteer member has the authority to sign any contract binding the association, blah, blah, blah. I guess, how did we specify that obviously the board can, because we are volunteers? I don't see that we're differentiated in this.
Okay, this was
Like
my
the-
understanding of what we had agreed to.
Yeah.
We took out a whole paragraph and,
Yeah, I know,
Yeah, okay.
and I remember doing that, I just don't, I mean, in reading through this, there's nothing that talks about, I mean, there's nothing that differentiates the board, since we are technically volunteer members. I don't know.
I think I can respond to that if you don't mind. If you don't mind.
I'm sorry,
I can respond directly to you pursuant to
Oh, go
Robert's
ahead,
rules.
okay.
Okay, my understanding that the answer to the previous question addressed to the chair is that we individually are volunteers. We, as volunteers individually, have no authority to enter into any contractual agreement. However, by virtue of the fact that we are elected by the community as directors, we do have legal authority as a board, as a governing body.
but not as an individual member.
To enter
Yeah.
into contracts.
Right.
We are not doing it on an individual basis. It is only the board that is doing it.
Clarification, Madam President. Only the 4 executive officers can actually sign the contract.
Which is a different thing. That's the physical
But it
act of
does
signing.
take the board as a whole to vote, and then the board can enter into a contract with the 4 executives being the signatory.
I agree, and I thought that that's what this said.
I'm suggesting, or my statement was to suggest that I think this is a sufficient statement, and it doesn't need to specify anything different for the board per se.
Yeah.
That's my understanding
Yeah.
of the situation.
And just to go back to the original statement, I have the notes from that day, and it is as, the one presented is as stated with the second paragraph completely marked out, and only the change of other than the general manager struck out. Other than that, it's exactly as discussed at the last board meeting.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anything else? All right. Architectural Control Committee, there are minutes posted online, and they are as submitted. Coming to Communications Committee, the only thing, let's see, completion of committee, okay. Yeah, each one of these will say completion of the committee volunteer documentation, and that will be just information for each one of you as to what next steps you need to take in order to get the volunteers informed about the different policies, et cetera, which we just reviewed. As far as communications goes, I'm going to make a couple of suggestions tonight about a couple of things that I would like to see each of these committees do in the following year, things that have been talked about in the past. And as far as communications go, it would be good to get a proposal from you about the message boards and lights at the mailboxes, if that's where you are planning to put those message boards, because the ones that are sitting at the gates right now, I find them in bad condition and difficult to read. Okay?
I will resubmit that.
Okay. And now, as I go through some of these other committees, I have found that 4 of them, at least 5 of them, have no definition of a quorum. So you don't know how many members you're supposed to have in order to have a quorum. If you look through both the bylaws and through your charters, you check on that. Now, communications was very good. You did present, that for yourself. Document review in the bylaws, it has no description there of what a quorum is.
No, it does not.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm asking, I guess it's document review to, let's see, 1, 2, 3 of these committees that I will mention. Bylaws will need to be changed in order to define a quorum, to work with the committee themselves and find out what would be appropriate to nominate for a quorum.
Certainly, I will speak on behalf of the Document Review Committee, but my understanding is that if we take a look at Robert's Rules, it does have a recommendation on what quorums are.
Okay.
And I believe it's not necessary, therefore, to amend the bylaws.
Okay, where was it? Well, I don't have it with me, but there is nothing in Robert's Rules related to quorum except the statement that it should be appropriate and the minimum number that is needed. And there is no number. It is not defined as a majority, et cetera, et cetera.
Certainly with regard to the DRC,
There is
my
no,
understanding is that there is not even a specification for a minimum number of members.
right.
So it would be difficult without actually imposing a number to come
Right.
up with a quorum other than to simply say
will
more
work
than
along
50% of
With
whoever.
what we
the mem-
have this
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
and I would like to be able to change the bylaws in November in order to nail this down.
We will try and come up with something that makes sense and is manageable and efficient.
Right, okay. Document review, do you have, and because it does state in there that the document review committee will have 2 board members and a community member. Do you have a community member yet to be approved?
I do not. I have issued invitations to several people. There are several others that I have thought about inviting. I will do so. I've extended another invitation this evening. I will get an answer back.
Okay.
We do have the 2 board members, however.
Okay, all right, so let us know when you do have
Will do.
another board member. Okay. Emergency preparedness does have a charter, and that charter does not define a quorum, so I would like emergency preparedness to please bring forward a new charter, including what a quorum is. And actually to look at something that Henry Renteria discussed at the orientation meeting, which was an evacuation plan and an ability to notify members when there is an emergency. That would be one of the things that it would be good to have by the end of this year. Finance Committee. There is actually no definition of quorum for Finance Committee. So that goes on to the DRC list.
Well, that's a standing committee. Are you asking me to add something into the bylaws
No,
that would set a quorum?
what I'm saying is I'm asking DRC to go over those bylaws.
okay.
Because, and then bring that back so that we can vote on it in November.
Okay, very good. Because right now, the maximum number is 7 on the committee, and so I've always assumed 4 was a quorum.
Well, that's an assumption, that's
Yeah,
not.
it is an assumption,
Yeah,
and
right,
right now,
yeah.
we only have 6, so I was also assuming
Okay.
4 would be appropriate, but I think that's great. I'm happy to help with that
Okay.
if needed.
Nominations and elections, I am aware that you are short 1 member right now and are advertising for another one. And there's no minutes for, any of these others. Parks, Trails, and Recreation, again, they do have a charter and they are lacking the definition of a quorum.
Negative.
Oh, okay. All right, well, what I have, I didn't see that. Okay, so Parks and Trails does have a quorum. Do you have members to be approved tonight? Does Parks and Trails have members to be approved?
No, I thought those were included in a previous meeting, but I can
I'm just looking
resubmit.
at the
And
agenda.
also, there was a discrepancy over 1 member, Ken, but I was informed by the office that he has been fully vetted and is also included,
Okay.
just for
Just
clarification.
point of information, yes, there was a handout in a prior board meeting, and Parks and Trails has a
Yes,
long
and
list
I
on
know
the
that they
back.
do have members who were voted in, but since this is on the agenda, I assume that they wanted to add members, but if not, we're fine.
And if I may, I mean, before something that comes on the agenda like this, whoever put the agenda together, reach out to the individual responsible would be great, so we don't waste everyone's time.
Understand what
Thanks.
We generally get a phone call from the chair telling us, here's the members that we need, and they give us the list, and we respond back to the chair to say they are vetted, not vetted, if there's an issue.
Okay, but there's nobody specifically
But who asked to put it on the
who
agenda, I guess
asked
is
to
what I'm
have this on the
asking.
agenda?
Actually, I had a conversation with Mike before he
Okay, but
decided
he's
he
not here
was
tonight.
not
Okay.
coming here
All
tonight.
right, we'll do this, we'll put that off till the next meeting then.
Very good. Ma'am, can I ask you to go back on the discussion on N&E, and then also on DRC? We had mentioned at the orientation that the N&E is brand new, and they have not ever had an election, and that the N&E manual has not been finished, and probably an SOP would be needed. And so when you were discussing priorities, if we
Sounds good, agreement?
That's actually going to be one of the things on my agenda for my meeting in January. So, yeah,
Okay,
the SOP, all of that, and discussing a time when we can all get together and have a training and workplace about that too. So that's already been,
yeah, okay. Okay, Larry, work with you?
Oh, that certainly works with me.
Yeah, okay.
That is to have the N&E manual ready well in time for the next AGM is one of our highest priorities. Since you've called on me, I would like to read something about the quorum that Robert says that quite
Okay.
specifically addresses your concern. On page 347, starting at approximately line 10, a little bit later that, in all committees and boards, the quorum is a majority of the members of the board or committee, unless a different quorum is provided for in the bylaws or in the document setting forth the committee, if it's not named in the bylaws. So by this text, There is
There
no
is an
need.
assumed
There
quorum.
is, it's not assumed, it's specified here in the text
Okay.
of Roberts that it is a majority of the members.
Okay.
So if DRC, for instance, ends up with 15 volunteers, then that would be essentially 7 people, or 8. 8, yeah.
And that's interesting because if you have a core number of members and then you have additional volunteers who are not part of the definition of, then which is the quorum?
Again, if they are not, if a volunteer is not a member of a committee, then they aren't considered as part of the quorum. If they are members of the committee, and
Okay.
my understanding is that our practice here, I'm not sure if it's specified in the bylaws, but our practice anyway is if you're going to volunteer with a committee, you have to be a member of the committee. So essentially, it is the same thing, but there may be instances, I know I was discussing with regard to communications and the website, there may be instances where volunteers are not members of the committee under special circumstances, but generally, it's the same thing.
Okay, all right. Carol?
No, actually, you're,
The quorum is for purposes of the ability to do business, meaning vote
Right.
for something.
Right.
And only members of the can achieve that. And so anyone that is a volunteer that is working with a committee that is not a committee member would not be a part of a quorum count,
Okay.
because they can't vote by definition.
Carol?
I think one of the challenges we have is that, for instance, the Emergency Preparedness Committee sometimes has 15 members, but maybe only 8 show up. So to actually try to do business, I think that would be a conversation that perhaps needs to be had with
Right.
the document review. What would comprise a committee? And then can you have committee members that aren't considered core committee members, that are the voters versus the people that do the business versus the people who are there to do volunteer work? I think that's where I think we have a challenge, is how do we get work done or business done if only a small percentage of the full committee shows up? That's where
So maybe
In
that's a
light-
reason for
in-
each one of the
in-
committees to examine what
Yeah.
is a quorum for
In
them.
light of what Robert said, that's a situation that would need a specific definition
Correct.
in the founding document, which
Yeah.
would, in the Finance Committee's case, be a change to the bylaws, but not with regard to the DRC, excuse me, the EPC. The EPC, in its founding document, because it's just done every year, can just specify that a quorum is no less than X.
Yeah, which is what communications has done.
Communications and parks, recs, and trails. And we recognized that, especially in the winter, with a large committee, like a communication committee, for example, or Parks, Trails, and Rec, where you have 15-plus named members of the committee, around the holidays, it's hard to get half of them there.
Exactly.
And so in the charters, we defined a quorum to be 1 board member and 3 other committee members, as an example of way to get
sense.
business done
Makes sense.
as necessary. And so I'd suggest that, and we can change the charter of EPC at any time, because it's not a standing committee.
not a
That's one of the
standing
benefits of being an ad hoc committee, is we can adjust it on the fly as the needs exist.
Larry?
Given this conversation, it would seem that this is not really an issue for the DRC. It's an issue for the committee to decide, change its charter and bring that to the board for approval.
Okay.
I mean, there's really no expertise needed for that.
Okay, if there are committees, however, which are standing committees, which perhaps would benefit from a different number than a majority, I think that's, each chair, please look at your own committee and decide what's best for you.
And if a chair has a difficulty or would like to propose a bylaw amendment, absolutely bring it to the DRC, and we'll do that.
Okay, okay? Thank you. Okay, Parks and Trails. Now we are at approval of draft Parks and Trails priorities.
Again, Mike asked to defer to January.
Okay. Okay. Okay, coming down to the executive committee right now. You'll see on page 43, the section of the bylaws describing the executive committee, and realizing that we actually need to vote on the composition of this group. And therefore, I would like to suggest that we approve the SVCA President, Vice President, Secretary, and Treasurer as the members of the 2019 Executive Committee.
Second.
Discussion.
I move that we
Okay.
approve by acclamation.
Yeah, approved by acclamation then. Okay, Long Range Planning Committee.
Oh, excuse me, madam. Would you like the DRC to propose that that be written into the executive committee definition so that we don't have to go through this every year?
No, I think that that's something that each board needs to
Perfectly
decide.
fine. That's why I asked.
Yeah, because, you know, as it is explained, it can have a different composition. If another board would like to do something different, I think that's fine. Okay, long-range planning. Tonight, I have a proposal for the chair. I would like to be the chair of that committee, and according to the bylaws, would like to name as the second board member Whitney Pierce. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sarah?
I have expressed interest in this committee when we talked about it before, so how was Whitney chosen? Because I would like to be considered.
I didn't get all that, I'm sorry.
I said that when we first talked about this, I don't know, 2 months ago, about long-range planning, that we needed to get it going, I had said that I wanted to be part of this committee, so I guess how
Okay.
was Whitney I don't, no one's talked to me
If you'd
about it.
like to be part of the committee, you can be. I have a long list of people who have expressed an interest. We want to get started on this the second week in January and have monthly meetings. I'm proposing that we meet the second Tuesday of each month, the main committee. And in the first meeting, discuss how we want to break up into subcommittees to work on the separate areas. And you are interested in being a member of that committee also?
Yeah, I guess, can it have more than 2 directors? Is
Yeah.
that
Oh,
specified?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
I think 5 is a problem. Yeah.
okay. Larry?
Since you have a long list, are you going to present that list tonight?
I am, it's
Oh,
right here. And
very
once
good.
we get the chairs voted on, then I will list the members.
Very good.
Okay. Any further discussion on the chair? All those in favor?
Yeah, Leslie and Whitney,
Okay.
I believe, or Leslie's
Okay.
chair.
Oh, there's another hand in the back. Okay, unanimous. All right, so the names that I have here, now the bylaws go through a description of 9 members, each one elected by the board or proposed by the committee, 3 to be elected each year for a 3-year term, just as with the board. At the present time, there are no members, so there's no, rollover to you have a 3-year term, et cetera, et cetera. And the people who have volunteered for the committee and have all been vetted are Bob Cooper, Dave Scott, Tom Fields, Fred Haslam, Gary Barra, Mark Lester, Scott Eubank, Scott Walsh, Steve Teske, Lee Langdon, Adam Tullis, Steve Birchler, Dave Ralston, Carol Holton, Chris Keller, Rob Gibbs, Richard Walke, Mitch Waterman, Mitch Waterson after he retires as the GM.
Retired is such an ugly term.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
a very
retired,
good
too.
term.
Megan Figeson, Sam Shahan, and Shanda Owens, and Sarah Holmstrom.
May I request to be placed on that as well, please?
You okay?
Yes.
And Larry Brown. Is there any discussion? I'm moving these people to be members of this team.
I have a question. Oh, sorry, oh,
Okay,
sorry.
Eric?
Does it have a second?
Yes, our second, sorry. Yeah, I'll second, just so we can talk.
Okay,
That includes 5 directors.
Yeah.
Oh, does that make
Yeah.
five
Yeah,
directors?
yeah,
Then
yeah.
I won't be
That's-
on five. Then I'll go on.
I'll be
Is
on.
that a concern?
and it is not, and the reason I will give is, at the first meeting, we will decide which 9 of this group will be the official members. And then the rest of the members will decide which subcommittees they want to be on, to work on. And does anybody see a problem, Carol?
This goes back to, I think, what I was saying earlier, is there should be a core group that are the committee.
Right.
But it's just like with Parks and Trails. There are subcommittees, and so you still have to be a member of the committee to be on a subcommittee. I would love to be on a subcommittee. I don't necessarily want to be part of the core group that runs the whole
Yeah,
thing.
right.
Okay, yeah, so that, I guess that's what I'm thinking is, that sounds like a good plan to me, and I think there's probably going to be more people who express interest.
I hope so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I have similar request. I am interested in participating and commenting and all of that.
As I said, we
but
will get together
I
at
do not
the
need to
first
vote.
meeting and, decide what are the different subcommittees that we ought to have. And then each person will decide how they want to contribute, to this. Larry?
Just a separate question. You brought up the point that the bylaws require that there be rotating 3-year terms.
Right. So we will draw names from,
Exactly.
yeah.
I was simply going to say the ACC, when it transferred into being voted in, they basically did the same thing. They just said,
Right.
who gets the short straw? Your term is 1 year, the next 2 and 3.
Right. We will do that at the first meeting. And I will bring it back to the full board. Any further discussion?
Well, I might have one. While I am an employee of the corporation, I am a member in good standing in the association, so what would preclude me from being on a committee?
The appearance of impropriety.
Are we whispering for a reason?
Dramatic effect.
I think perhaps it would be appropriate for you to attend the first meeting as a staff member.
Very well. I'll attend the next one by phone.
Which is another. Okay.
Seashell.
All those in favor of the membership list having been read to you? Okay, that seems to be unanimous. Thank you. We now have a long-range planning committee, which will start to function in January. We're now down to continuing business and voting as necessary, maintenance connection software status update, or did you?
We already did this.
We did
I'd
that
like
in
to
the GMB. Okay, that's what I thought. Going on to new business and voting is necessary, the AR uncollectible accounts, and has that, anything
Jennifer.
additional on that?
This is a Jennifer action. It's an annual thing that we have to do. I defer to the county manager. This was discussed and agreed upon last night at the Finance Committee.
We have just over $27,000 in accounts that we would like to write off. These accounts are past the statute of limitations. All of them except one, which the woman is deceased, the estate has no money in it, so she's never gonna buy property here again. This is an annual thing to review the items which are no longer, the accounts, member accounts, which are no longer collectible. These people don't live here. It's not as if they can sell their house and we'll try to collect it then. And so I would like to recommend that we write off this amount. I foolishly did not bring that dollar amount with me, but it is just, it's 29,000.
Was it 27 or something?
27.
I think, yeah, I think it was 27 plus.
26, she gave a number last night, I
Right.
don't recall it, but it's under $30,000.
It is,
Paula has it.
Oh, she has it,
Thank
she
you.
wrote it down last night. Good for, I have it, but I left it at home.
it's in my office.
And
Good for Paula.
Hold on.
While she's,
$27,867.65.
Precisely.
I move that we direct staff to write off that number, whatever it was she said, as uncollectible for the year 2018.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? Larry?
While those people don't have properties here, I am reminded of a situation where properties outside of Sudden Valley were at least considered. Do any of these folks have properties outside of Sudden Valley, inside Whatcom County, for instance, that we might take a look at?
I don't know if they do or not. They're past the statute of limitations. You
Anyway,
can't
so,
legally
yeah.
collect on them.
Right. Okay, very good.
Anything else?
Call the question.
Seeing no objection, all those in favor? And the vote is unanimous.
Madam President, we have a new law that has come into effect. We've asked Lisa Letchworth, the HR professional for the corporation, to give a briefing on the insurance recommended changes for our employee handbook and for the Paid Family Medical Leave Act 2019 overview.
Okay, every year at the end of the year, we submit our handbook to our legal counsel as well as our insurance brokers to ensure that we are in compliance, especially considering that in the last, at least the last 4 years, there's been a new law that affects employment. This year, the new law that is affecting all employers is a Paid Family Medical Leave Act, and that is through Washington State. Currently, the Family Medical Leave Act it's a federal mandate, and it only applies to companies with 50 or more employees. We don't employ more than 50 employees throughout the entire year, so we're exempt. However, the Paid Family Medical Leave Act is everyone, and it doesn't matter your company size. The only difference is, I'll just try to get a super quick overview of what that law is. That means that employees will contribute up to 0.4% of their annual or their income into this fund, similarly to unemployment insurance. So they pay this amount, and then when if they become eligible for family medical leave, they are paid up to $1,000 per week and $100. Employers are required to participate in that 0.4% if they are over 50. We're not. So what this means is our employees will contribute 0.22% of the 0.4%. So we're talking in just a couple of dollars. Every pay period, probably $2 if you have a $50,000 income. We as employers do have the option to cover that amount as an additional benefit, but given the amount is so small, we've just concluded that we don't need to make that. It won't benefit us necessarily as a corporation to make that coverage, and this law is not going anywhere. So that is an overview, just basically of this new law. It is state, but it does not supersede the federal. So we're still, if we had more than 50 employees, we would still have to honor FMLA and the Paid Family Medical Leave, if that makes sense. Do you have any questions about that? About this? Okay. In the review of our employee handbook, that was the only change that was made by our legal department, just to get us in compliance with this new employment law that's passing. Additionally, just as an aside, we start making deductions for our employees on the 1st of the year. We report this on the April 1st, so every quarter. So our reporting starts April 1st. But employees are not actually eligible to receive the benefit until the end of the year. So the state will be collecting these funds for a full year before employees can actually collect. So no one will actually be able to benefit from this until 2020. Okay. The only, our insurance company, however, had a little bit to say about our policy. We are in complete compliance as far as benefits are concerned. However, they had some suggestions, and this was based on the World at Work benchmark, and this is an international benchmark. So I put a call into one of our recruiters to see how closely this aligns to Whatcom County, because as an international benchmark, it might be a little bit off. But the recommendation was that we currently offer 7 paid holidays to our employees, and benchmark is 8 to 9. So the suggestion was to add an additional paid holiday the day after Thanksgiving, because it's always on a Friday, and then a floating paid holiday that is evaluated at the beginning of each calendar year, because other holidays like Christmas Eve, New Year's could fall on a Tuesday or a Saturday, may want to offer it, may not. So it would be a holiday that could be offered. For instance, this year, Christmas Eve is on a Monday, and so is New Year's Eve. And it's not a paid holiday. So it's a day on and then your paid holiday off. And just, it's something to consider. And then the other suggestion that was made was that we're below benchmark with regards to our accruals for vacation and vacation time. We currently offer, we have a 3-step accrual system based on years of service. And the lowest is 10 paid days off per year for up to 3 years of service. 15 for 4 to 7 years, and 20 for 8 years or more of service. And benchmark is actually 7 days more than that for each of those steps. So at this time, I cannot make a recommendation because we don't have information based on our demographic. What we have is information based on national numbers that were given to us by our insurance company. I was hoping to be able to provide a recommendation tonight, but I didn't get a call back yet from our recruiter. This is someone that we go to say, well, what do you see? You see this industry day in and day out. What is your norm? So I'm not certain what to recommend as far as that goes, but perhaps wait for more information. Any questions or thoughts?
Carol?
Just curious, what are you asking us to consider? I'd really like recommendations from you. So for the second part you just talked about, I'd say, let's wait until we get more information. As far as the floating holiday.
That is a recommendation.
That is your recommendation, so.
And this is something that I personally know to be true of this area, is that 8 to 9 paid holidays is the norm. And so that I feel very comfortable with. The other one, I feel like we need more information based on our current demographic, because that's an extreme difference. 7 extra paid days off a year is a lot. So I would like to wait. It was for information purposes only.
Sarah?
I would just say I agree with that. I think 8 to 9 is kind of what I've seen. The other one, what we give is standard for everything I've seen around here. So I think, and you said 7 days each level?
Each level is 7 days
That's-
higher. I'm
crazy.
happy to, I can send this to you just so you can see what they said. Okay. But like I said, I don't feel comfortable recommending that until we know more about what really is happening here in Whatcom County.
Carol?
I'd like to move that we approve the extra day after Thanksgiving. Is that what you had said? And a floating holiday?
Yes.
For our employees.
Is there a second?
I'll second, but I'll ask the mover to clarify that the floating holiday may or may not be given depending on the year. In other words, if Christmas falls on a Wednesday or a Saturday, then a floating holiday may not be a good thing. I don't know, but that gives 7 or 8 kind of on average.
Carol?
Typically for when I know I've been retired a couple of years, but typically if Christmas falls on a Saturday, you get Friday off.
Yeah.
Typically, if it falls on a Sunday, you get Monday off.
Right.
So that's the floating holiday is the component.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
But, okay.
So, or if that's the one that you primarily would give.
That is,
We would not concur with that.
Okay, fine. I'm just saying the floating holiday would stand during the year. You're saying it may not be given. in a year.
No, Christmas, you'd still get that one day for Christmas. So here's an example of a floating holiday. First of the year, you look to see, oh, is the 4th of July on a Friday? Okay, give them Thursday. Is the 4th of July on a Sunday? Give them Monday. So what you do is you look at the calendar and you decide where you're going to
Right.
put the floating holiday, but you're still going to get a day off.
I think
for
we're
Christmas.
agreeing.
Okay.
Really, I think we're
And you're
agreeing.
clarifying that,
Yeah.
in other words, it's not a maybe you get it, it's the question is when
When
you
you
get
do
it.
it.
Exactly.
Correct.
Very good. Then
Yeah.
with that clarification, thank you. I absolutely second.
Okay.
Paul?
For discussion, I was just going to agree with Sarah. In my experience, I do a lot of hiring, but it's in Skagit, not necessarily Whatcom, but I think they're pretty similar. And talking with applicants, I've actually seen hesitation to take jobs at, my company actually offers 7, and I've seen hesitation to take that without the addition of specifically the day after Thanksgiving, which is pretty much expected by most companies, is that day is a paid day off, and if it's not, then people often have to take it unpaid, and that can be a contributing factor to hesitation to take a job. And the floating holiday is same thing, it's just an undefined. So that's all I really had
Sarah?
to add, but I agree.
I guess the other thing I've seen with the floating holiday is people doing it as like birthday leave. So it's, can vary by employee or a day of your choice for employees. So it's not the whole office closing down for that whole day, but it's an additional day that each employee can choose one day of the year to take.
We actually offer 24 hours of personal leave, so that would be considered the same kind of thing, a floating holiday. What we're proposing is that it's another paid holiday company-wide that could move around the calendar based on the year.
Anything else?
Move the question.
With no objection? All those in favor? And it's unanimous, thank you. Okay, so we, property owner comments. Anything? No? Okay.
You are tonight.
Is there a board response to that?
Here, here.
Welcome.
Thank you, okay. All right, would anybody like to move closed session?
Move that we go into closed session.
Second.
At 8:48, thank you.
Nice, quick meeting.
I try to be efficient.
Quicker than I thought it would be.